Yo, what's going on, guys? Cjeths back here with an episode where I will be going over all of the players I created for the NHL 18 New York Rangers franchise mode. I've received plenty of requests to do this video, and I didn't do it last year. Long story, but I will not be telling it. So we'll just do it this year, and I'm going to go over every single player that I created and why I gave them the overall and the individual statistics that I gave them. So, first and foremost, Alexei Bereglazov. So, the reason Bereglazov got his stats, I did not give him great offensive stats, only 77 offensive awareness. The reason being is his best season in the KHL was 19 points, where he had 1 goal and 18 assists, which is a good season. However, KHL numbers translated to NHL numbers, you got to give and take a little bit. So I gave him low stats to start. I gave him high top 6 potential because I think honestly I could have given him medium top 4 potential, but I wanted to keep it as realistic as possible, and I just don't know if he could live up to that medium top 6 potential in real life. So that's what I gave him. I gave him good physical stats. He's a big guy. He's 6'4", 203 pounds, very physical in the KHL, and he's considered to be a shutdown defenseman. So I gave him pretty good defensive stats, all right? Not the fleetest of foot at all. I probably could have made his skating a little bit lower. But, yeah, I mean, the biggest parts of Bereglazov is his defensive stats and his physical stats. And that is what I keyed in on when I was creating him. Number 2, who do we got? Anders Bjork. Let me just pull him up on Elite Prospects. Bjork. All right. It would really suck if Elgato closed out on me. Okay. So, Anders Bjork. Let's see what we did with Anders Bjork. He's kind of like, I didn't make him a great player yet. He's a 5th-round pick of the Boston Bruins in 2014. Now, when he was drafted, he was putting up good numbers in the USHL, but only until last year, or even the year before, was he putting up ridiculous numbers at the University of Notre Dame. He's more of an offensive player from what I've seen and read, so I gave him relatively decent offensive stats, at least for a starter in this game. The way you got to look at this is if it was NHL 17, his stats would be 3 higher than what they are here. Although if this was NHL 17, I think I'd keep his shooting at the same. I just wanted to give him a good base to start out for because I consider him a sniper. Defensive stats a little bit lower. He does have a lot of stuff to work on in his defensive game. If you've ever seen him play at the University of Notre Dame, you know what I'm talking about. Not the fleetest of foot yet. I gave him decent skating stats, a good base to build off of. Physical stats, nice and low, not overly physical. He's 6 foot, 185, but he's not, that physical. And then his offensive stats, I hovered around the 80s, in and about there. His discipline, I kept a little bit low. Because he takes a good amount of minor penalties. For example, at the U17 U.S. team, he had 48 penalty minutes, which is equivalent to we're looking at 24 minors. So I mean that's a lot of penalties. So I gave him 76 discipline, but that's gonna go up. And poise is at 72. Yeah. So I mean he's a little bit poised, a little bit. Still a young guy. Let's see who's next after Anders Bjork. Adam Bokvist. He is a prospect coming up in the next draft. Now I made him a 2-way defender. Some people would disagree because he's put up decent offensive numbers in Sweden. But I decided to give him 2-way status because that's what, that's what they were saying on hockeyprospect.com. Yeah, that's what it was. 5'11", 170 on the dot. He's a right-handed shooter. I gave him good offensive awareness because he makes good offensive plays. I kept his passing a little bit lower, though, because I don't want him to because he's only projected to go within the top 15 in the next NHL draft, but any other draft, like if he was drafted last year, he would probably be in the top 5 to 8. I gave him good defensive stats because he's a 2-way defender. I wanted to round him out. He's a very talented skater if you've ever seen him play. His shot is about as basic as a defenseman can get. Decent deking for a defenseman. Good puck control. Good hand-eye. Low physical stats. He's 5'11", 170. He's not overly physical. And he's playing in the Swedish Elite League, which is not as physical from what I've gathered and research on. It's not as physical as the NHL, so I kept his physical stats a little bit lower. His defensive stats and offensive stats are within a median. So I kept him decent. Good enough for the upcoming draft. He's 74 overall. So in NHL 17, he's 77 overall. Next, we got Alexander Durgachov, or however you say his name. Okay, let's look him up. Durgachov. Okay, forward, born in 1996. Okay. They have a really long report that I'm not going to read out on Elite Prospects, but we will go over him. Let's just go over some basic points. Plays with a lot of grittiness, good ability to score, parks his ass in front of the net, sizey power forward, successful role as a scorer. Now, he's currently bouncing between the KHL and the VHL. The VHL is basically the KHL's minor league team. Again, one of the main reasons I created him is because the Los Angeles Kings prospect pool is not that great. So I wanted to give them someone to build off of. And he does have realistic potential to play in the NHL one day, but nothing that's ridiculous. I mean, when he was in the MHL, he put up a lot of high scoring numbers, but so far in the KHL and the VHL, nothing exactly to write home about. So I didn't really give him that great a passing because, I mean, last year he had 2 goals and 0 assists. So I was not impressed with his passing numbers. I gave him a little bit of physical stats. He's not a hitter, but he's physical in that, like, he battles in front of the net. He's not overly aggressive either. From what I've heard, when he hits his top speed, he's decently fast, but he doesn't really accelerate well. He's not very well balanced, believe it or not. His shot, he's got a hard shot, not that accurate. Defensive awareness, yeah, I mean, he does get back, but where I put him is he's 2, 3, maybe 4 years away from being ready to be a full-time NHLer, if he even develops that far. So I think I gave him high top 9 potential. I gave him those stats. I didn't bring him up too much, but I brought him up enough to where he could be serviceable in like a 3rd or 4th line AHL role, one day an NHL role. And that's all I really had to say about Durgachev. I didn't know enough about him to get too in-depth, but just enough to get a basis for him. Moving on, Adam Fox, the defenseman for the Carolina Hurricanes. Another defensive prospect for the Hurricanes. They do not have a shortage of these. And another offensive defenseman at that. I made him an offensive defenseman, and here's why. At Harvard University, he put up 40 points in 35 games last year. That is freaking impressive for a defenseman. Especially his first year at, college hockey. Originally, wait a second. Is he on the Flames or the Hurricanes? Oh, shit. He's supposed to be on the Flames, not the Hurricanes. Whoopsie daisies. He's supposed to be on the Flames, but there you go. Found an error. Gotta fix that after this. But anyways, the Calgary defenseman, not the Hurricanes defenseman. I gave him medium top forward potential. He's offensive defenseman. I gave him good offensive stats. I didn't give him great defensive stats yet. Because he's still only in college. He hasn't really learned all the defensive aspects of hockey yet, so I gave him just decent defensive stats. He's a good skater, not overly physical. I gave him low physical stats, but all you got to know about him is just good offensive stats and a pretty decent skater. Moving on from that, Adam Husker, the New York Rangers. Don't ever look up for him. I'll put up a couple really good college years. I only gave him fringe starter because the Rangers got so many goalie prospects, so many that are projected to be starters in the NHL. I could have had like 6 goalies on the Rangers, then I could have just given him medium starter potential, but I didn't want to do that. So I gave him fringe starter. I rounded out his stats enough to where he's easily a minor pro, like a collegiate pro, or CHL starting goalie, on the fringe of an AHL backup just to start for Adam Huska. That's really all I got to say about him. He's got high fringe starter. Alex Kerfoot, don't even need to talk about this guy. Had a beastly year last year in college. One of the most sought-after college free agents after Will Butcher and just after Neil Pionk. After Neil Pionk. So, Kerfoot was number 2 in the sweepstakes this year. Picked up by the Colorado Avalanche after being drafted by the New Jersey Devils. I think I gave him pretty good offensive stats for someone coming out of college this sought-after. I gave him high top 9 potential. I wanted to give him medium top 6. But what I noticed was when I was just doing my little simulations, when I gave him medium top 6, he was not growing at all. When I gave him high top 9, he actually grew to about an 81, 82. I probably could have made him a little bit higher in overall, but the problem was the more I raised his stats up, the more unrealistic seasons he was having where, like, I made him 78 overall in his year one. He had like 88 points. It was just ridiculous. I don't know why it happened, but it did, and it was consistent too. Decent defensive stats. If I were to go back and edit him, I think I'd just make his shot a little bit better, his deking a little bit better, and maybe raise his offensive awareness to 83. But just know that if you do that, he's going to have some ridiculous seasons for some unknown reason. Probably could up his defensive awareness a little bit too. Only because he's a little bit older. It's harder for players to develop in this game when they're that older. So if I were to do anything to Alex Kerfoot, in terms of going back, I'd make his defensive stats a little bit better. And offensive stats just a little better. I don't want to make him too better because for some reason, I don't know, after I create him, he just goes off. After Alex Kerfoot, we got Alexei Lipanov. I got to bring this guy up. Alexei Lipanov. Okay. Born in 1999. Same year as me. Why is this going? Okay. Third round pick in 2017 by the Tampa Bay Lightning. He really was only just drafted, but I gave him. I think I gave him high top 9. What the hell is that? Whoa. I gave him pretty good stats for someone that was drafted in the third round. Here's why. He's a VHL, MHL player, so he's been playing in Russia for a while. He snagged a bronze medal at the World Juniors. He's not that bad. He puts up good defensive stats, but he's more of a two-way player. And he's good enough that HockeyProspects.com actually wrote a pretty good review on him, saying that he's a pretty good offensive player, but he's more of a two-way still. A little bit physical, but not overly. Decent skater. He's got a lot to build off of. He's still very young, so I didn't give him a high overall, but yeah. Angus Redmond, the goaltending prospect for the Anaheim Ducks. I gave him pretty generous stats in that I gave him starting potential that he would be probably a backup in the Ducks minor league system right now. Yeah, I don't really have much to say about him. He's pretty good. Got some work to do, but I think he'll be a good goalie, both in real life and this game. I couldn't really... The problem is with making goalies is you can't really get a lot of information about their individual stats. Like, I kind of had to go based off what I've seen from film, and there is very, very limited film on him. You got to dig deep. But, yeah. So I gave him that potential. All I know is that he is projected to be an NHL starter one day. Andrei Svechnikov, quite basic. Don't have to go into any detail about him. An absolute stud. Any team that drafts him is guaranteed getting a top 9 forward the season after they draft him. I gave him very, very generous offensive statistics, and I even gave him pretty good defensive statistics, but that was really only to get his overall up a little bit. I gave him great skating stats and pretty good physical stats too, as he is, believe it or not, quite the physical player for just a playmaker/sniper. I gave him playmaker only because I noticed playmakers put up more points, and I don't really want to call him a sniper yet. Excuse me, because his collegiate stats were pretty much, not collegiate, USHL stats were pretty, rounded out. He wasn't really a sniper, but he wasn't really a playmaker either. He's got high elite potential and is an absolute freaking stud. Moving on, Blaine Byron, picked up by the Florida Panthers minor league team. He was one of the top 10 sought after college free agents this year. He's a little all over the map. I kind of just gave him a median of high 70s, low 80s everywhere. That's really what he is. Except for his physical stats, he's not very physical for someone that's 6 feet tall, which is, I guess, expected. He's only 172 pounds. Rounded him out a little bit, but nothing too crazy with Blaine Byron. Moving on, Brady Tkachuk. Another one, I gave him very high aggressiveness because he is highly aggressive. Probably could have made his strength a little bit higher. Body checking is reasonable. Decent skater. He's pretty, he's meaty. Yeah, he's decently quick, I guess. Decent balance. I gave him a well shot for someone his age. Decent offensive awareness. Pretty good defensive stats. I've seen a lot of people were quite surprised at how decent or good he is defensively for someone his age and his play style. He's a big boy. I gave him pretty good puck skills. Just well-rounded. Just made sure he goes in the top 5. If I were to do anything else to him, I would probably make his passing a little bit higher. Maybe up his shot just a little, just the tiniest amount, and probably his strength up by 2 or 3. That's really about it. Brady Tkachuk. Moving on, Bode Wild. Another guy that's going to be drafted this year. 2-way defender. Probably could have made him an offensive defenseman, but I prefer to make him a 2-way. I just noticed they grow a little bit better. So I just rounded him off. Gave him good offense, good defense for someone his age. Should go in the top 10 of the draft. Decent skater. At an NHL level, good skater at OHL level. Hard shot, not really that accurate. Decent physical stats. He's 6'2", 194. He's a big boy for his age. Right-handed shot. Really all I could say about him. Cole Gutman, another draft pick by the Tampa Bay Lightning. I didn't really know enough about him and couldn't gather enough about him to really go too in-depth. So I just based his overall off of his stats. So I kind of got this. He's only 18 years old. I kind of just rounded him out. Everything mid to high 70s. You got a couple 80s in there, but nothing too crazy. Should grow to be all right, though. After him, you got Cale Makar, drafted by the Colorado Avalanche out of the AJHL. Gave him great offensive stats, decent defensive stats. I only gave him high top 4 potential as opposed to elite potential because I think he's like 3 or 4 years away from the NHL as opposed to 1 or 2 like most top 5 picks. So I kind of gave high top 4 to slow his growth, but make sure he still reaches a high peak. So I just rounded him out. I really focus on his offensive stats, making him good offensively. That's about it. For Cale Makar, very impressive prospect, though. I think he'll be very good one day. Moving on, Casey Middlestat, I gave medium elite potential because I watched him play a few times and he just looks like a total beast. I gave him very generous offensive stats, pretty generous defensive stats considering. I probably could have given him a little bit lower. Gave him good physical stats just based off of his size, and he does get a little bit gritty. Good acceleration, but a relatively low top speed. I mean, that's going to be worked on as he progresses. Yeah, that's really about it for him. Just good offensive stats overall. Chris Nell, another Rangers goaltending prospect, projected to be a starter one day. Just gave him high backup potential. Didn't want to go too crazy. He's pretty good goalie. I got to see him in some preseason action. He moves very well, very poised, but a little bit older. Just kind of rounded him out a little bit. Didn't want to make him too great. Moving on to Chris Nell. Callie Rosen, undrafted pickup by the Toronto Maple Leafs. Give him high top 6 potential. I give him a little bit better defensive stats than I did offensive stats because I think that's what you can get out of him. He's not crazy offensive good, but he's pretty decent. Good skater. Actually fighting pretty hard for an NHL spot this year. But you never know. He's 23 years old. Give him pretty good base stats. Nothing I could really say about him too much. I'm actually going to stop using elite prospects, and I'm just going to go back to my Elgato before it exits me out of the app. Okay, moving on. Dennis Cholowski, first round pick by the Red Wings. Pretty good defenseman. I didn't make him good enough to be NHL ready this year because it's been said by many people he's not. So I made him good enough to where within 2 or 3 years he will be an NHL defenseman, which is projected. And you know how the Detroit Red Wings are. I mean, they over-ripen their players before they call them up, with the exception of Dylan Larkin. So that's what I did with him. Excuse me. Pretty good defensive stats, pretty good offensive stats. He got something good to grow off of. I gave him good base stats, considering what I wanted him to be. Moving on, Dante Fabro. National fans know a lot about him. He's a well-rounded defenseman. Well-rounded. Doesn't really excel in any part of his defense. He's just very smart. That's why I gave him a high poise at 75. And he just plays the game well. Not overly physical, because his physical stats pretty low. But just as a defenseman as a whole, he's very well-rounded. Dylan Sandberg, picked by the Winnipeg Jets. I forgot what round. Again, I just gave him well-rounded stats. There was nothing too crazy about him. He's a big boy. He's relatively physical, but not enough to give him more than 2.5-star physical stats. Not a great skater from what I've read, so I just gave him decent skating. Don't expect him to be in the NHL for like another 3 or 4 years. I just gave him good stats to build off of and high top 6 potential. Denis Zarapov actually just got kicked out of the KHL. Pretty good offensive player in the KHL, I will say, for his old age. I gave him high top 6 potential. That way he doesn't lose his potential and retire early. He's 36 years old. Gave him pretty good offensive stats to start with. That's just to get his overall up because he's not very physical. I gave him low physical stats. Relatively low defensive stats, too. But yeah, that's Denis Zarapov. He's UFA. Dmitry Zukhanov, picked by the Vancouver Canucks. I gave him top 6 potential because I want to see him grow in. Just be pretty good. A lot of people called him a grinder. Some called him a two-way. Some called him a power forward. I thought 5'11" is a little too small for power forward. But I just gave him grinder. He reminds me a lot of Ryan Callahan in that he's below 6 foot. Doesn't weigh a lot, but he's pretty grindy. I probably could have made his physical stats a little bit better, but I figured that'll come with age and as he grows, so I don't want to make it too great You know, you don't want a 99 across-the-board physical player and then not have any other good stats. So let's give him a good base. I give him pretty good offensive awareness to start off with. He is a pretty good scorer. After that, Eli Tolvanen actually tearing up the KHL right now. Absolute beast. Gave him great offensive awareness. Low passing because he's more of a scorer. Low defensive stats, low physical, but a good skater. If you've ever seen him play in the KHL, you know exactly what I'm talking about. After that, you got Grant Mishmash, another grinder by Nashville. Now, his physical stats have been pretty good because he actually is already a physical beast if you've ever watched him play. Defensive stats, nothing to write home about. He's pretty good offensively, but nothing great. Probably 4 years out of the NHL. Henrik Bjorkstrom, pretty good player. You guys remember him from the Florida Panthers franchise mode. Not a passer, more of a scorer. Pretty reliable defensively, but not a overly fast skater. Pretty physical too. Just rounded him out pretty well. I gave him a low passing though. It does not ever mount up a lot of assists. I don't know why. Just look up his stats on Elite Prospects. After that, Ilya Kovalchuk, you guys know enough about him. I just made him an absolute stud. Ilya Samsonov, goaltending prospect for the Washington Capitals, gave him high starter potential. Because if I gave him elite, he'd grow too fast, and then Braden Holtby would be shipped out. Just well-rounded goaltender. I made him pretty low overall. That way, again, gives more time for Braden Holtby to play out. I don't want him replacing Holtby too young. Then Holtby gets put on the block and traded at the age of like 30 or 31, and then the Capitals got an 85 overall goalie as opposed to 92, which just wouldn't make sense. After that, Igor Shesterkin, I gave him 75 overall, elite potential. Shesterkin currently has like a 1.38 goals against average in the KHL in like 15 games. I'm pretty sure he's still undefeated. Just an absolute stud goaltender. He projected to be an elite goaltender in the future of the NHL. I gave him this high overall potential because he's expected to come over to the NHL within a year or two whenever his KHL contract expires. And it's going to take him about 2 years to grow to about just enough to make him an NHL starter. Ilya Sorokin I made better than Igor Shesterkin because technically he is in the KHL. Everyone says he is. He's the #1 goaltending prospect in the world with Shesterkin right behind him. So I gave him really good stats to start off with because he's closer to coming to the NHL than Shesterkin is, I believe, with Grice and Halak really struggling in the Islanders' net. So I gave him high overall, medium elite potential, and he will be in the NHL very soon. Very good goaltender in the KHL. Jordan Greenway, you guys remember him from Minnesota Wild franchise mode. Big boy for his age, 6'5", 238, great physical stats, decent defensive stats, good offensive stats for his shot. Hard shot, not accurate. Not much of a passer, but good offensive awareness. Kind of got stone hands like Brian Boyle, but, you know, he's got a good base to grow off of. Not a fast skater at all, which is expected from someone of that size. Jesper, this guy I created for the upcoming draft. Good Swedish player. Kind of base his stats off of what I read up on him. I didn't really get to see a lot of video on him, so that's really just what I got from pretty good offensive player, decent defensive stats. Should be drafted within the top 10. Joshua Norris, first-round pick by the San Jose Sharks. Pretty good offensive stats. He's got a very hard shot from what I've seen, but not accurate, which seems to be the case with most of these young guys. Good skater, decent, not really, below level physical stats, decent defensive stats. Really all I can say about Joshua Norris. Jake Ottinger, first-round pick by the Dallas Stars. Pretty good goaltender. Gave him high starter potential. It's going to take a while for him to grow, so I just kept him at 65 overall. Don't expect to see him in the NHL for about 5 or 6 years. Jake Wallman, I gave him good overall to start because he is close to the NHL. And, yeah, just well-rounded defenseman. Nothing, doesn't excel at anything but skating, really, from what I've picked up. But, yeah, just very well-rounded defenseman. Kiefer Bellows, gave him low overall. He's not expected to play in the NHL for another year or two. Gave him good offensive stats to start with because that's what he is, an offensive player. Low defensive stats, I think that's reasonable. Low physical stats and decent skating stats, but he's got a lot to work on. Kasper Bjorkqvist, the Pittsburgh Penguins. They seem to have a plethora of young players that come out of nowhere. I know he's a playmaker, but I kind of rounded him out enough to be like a kind of two-way forward-ish build, and that his defensive stats aren't that weak with high stick checking. Decent skating, decent shot, minor league player for a few years. He'll be in the NHL in about 3 years. Kirill Kaprizov, the KHL sniper, I believe in the KHL still. He's a sniper, very good shot, hard and relatively accurate wrist shot. High offensive awareness, low passing, he's a sniper. Decent defensive stats, low physical, great skater. Klim Kostin, Power forward, believe it or not. A lot of people think he's a sniper, but he's really not. If you ever watch him play, he's pretty freaking physical. Not aggressively physical, but he is pretty physical. Yeah, just gave him good strength and whatnot to work with. Decent defensive stats, good offensive stats for someone his age. Probably will see him in the NHL in 2 years. Keith Petruzzelli, just give the Red Wings a good goaltending prospect. Probably won't see him until he's about 24, 25 years old in the NHL, but he is someone that is projected to be a Red Wings backup or maybe even starter in the future. Nikita Gusev probably won't be in the NHL for till he's 27 years old. And he's already 25 years old, so I gave him good stats to start with. This is basically what he is. He's an absolute stud in the KHL. Excuse me. I just need to give him good stats because at the age of 25, he's not going to grow much. If I give him 75 overall, he's not going to grow at all. So I just gave him good stats to build off of. Neil Pionk. If any Ranger fans, you guys know, you've watched him play. I could probably lower his defense stats a little bit, but I wanted to make him as close to NHL ready as I could without actually making him an NHL defenseman because that's what he is right now. I probably could have given him lower, medium, top 4 potential, but I didn't want to overstack the Rangers. I really don't feel like having people comment below like, oh my god, New York Rangers bias, you're such an asshole. Like, I'm just not trying to hear that because it's happened before. I just want nothing to do with it, so I just gave him high top 6, and I did not make him exactly NHL ready. So this is what I got on Neil Pionk. After that, we got Nikolai Prohorkin, 24 years old. I probably, in hindsight, could have made his overall a little bit higher because he's a little bit older. Hard for him to grow. But then again, he's not an overly great prospect. He's someone that's not going to be in the NHL until he's about 28 or 29 years old. At least I think. And then he'll keep growing until then. But unfortunately, in this game, people stop growing at the age of 25, basically. So this is what I gave him to start with. In hindsight, I go back and make him a little bit better. I'd probably bring him up to about a 74 overall, but I wanted to make this as realistic as possible. Oliver Wahlstrom, another top prospect coming in. Just gave him really good offensive stats. That's about it. Nothing too defensive about him, more physical, so yeah. Peter Cehlarik, no, he's already in the game. I had to ruin him. Quentin Hughes, I gave him very good stats to start off with. Should be an NHL-ready defenseman by year 1. Top 5 pick, to say the very least. Great two-way defenseman. You can look up on him. He's very good. Rasmus Kupari, another guy from Sweden coming in. Very good offensive player. Pretty defensively reliable, too, from what I've seen from him. Not overly physical, but physical enough. Great skater. He doesn't have a very high top speed, but he gets to his top speed very fast. He's a pretty exciting player to watch if you want to watch. Just watch him play around a little bit. After that, Rem Pitlick. Another pick by the Natural Predators. Nothing too crazy, just well-rounded to start off with. Probably a couple years away from making the NHL. Yeah, nothing really too crazy. Just gave him better offensive stats than defensive. Ryan Poling, picked by the Canadiens. Good defensive stats, low offensive stats from what I've seen. Not a great shot. Decent skater, not very physical. Just wanted to round him out as a good two-way forward in the future. Riley Tuft, a big boy from Dallas. Very hard shot, not overly accurate. Good offensive awareness. Decent puck skills, decent defensive stats, pretty good physical stats for someone his age. Good acceleration, but he's very damn slow. Pretty damn slow, rather. Shane Bowers, very, very talented offensive player. Got a lot of work on defensive aspects of his game, but I think he's closer to the NHL than people give him credit for. Stefan DaCosta was just made a free agent. He was released from his, I think, KHL club or Swedish club. So he's a free agent, just gave him good offensive stats, just enough to make him like a third-line scorer. Spencer Fu, one of the more sought-after free agents this year, 23 years old. Pretty good offensive stats, pretty good defensive stats, just enough to find him a fourth or third-line spot in the NHL. Trent Frederick, a couple years out, but he's got a lot of raw talent he needs to be worked on. Good power forward, he's a big boy. Probably a decent 82, 83 overall player of the future. Maybe peak around the same spot where Kevin Hayes is right now in this game. Tage Thompson, you can give him high top 6. Great defensive player, great offensive player, very well-rounded, very close to the NHL. Wouldn't be surprised if he has a couple spotlights this year in the NHL. Tyler Wall, another Rangers prospect. I'm going to get too into him. Vinny Lecchieri, same thing. Probably actually in hindsight could have given him a much better shot and higher potential. But again, don't really want to hear that Rangers bias BS. Valeri Nichushkin, close to the NHL, but he went back to the KHL for a little bit, probably be back next year, so I gave him good stats to start with. Vince Pedri, again, I don't really see him any higher than a 7th defenseman in the NHL, so I gave him decent stats to start off with. Probably build up to about a 75, 76 overall. when he peaks. Vladimir Tkachev, y'all know about him. Won the KHL Rookie of the Year. Could have given him higher overall to start with, but then again, he's a couple years out of the NHL. From actually being in the NHL, so I don't want to make him too great to start with. Wade Allison, very good prospect for the Philadelphia Flyers, so I give him high top 9 potential. I don't see him as a top 6 player in the future, but definitely a top 9. Pretty good offensive stats. He's got a hard shot. He's got a good shot to work with, at least to build off of. He's 20 years old, 70 overall. Pretty decent physically, great skater if you've ever seen him skate, and decent defensive stats. Will Butcher, the most sought-after free agent, the Hobey Baker winner. Very well-rounded defenseman. Made sure to give him high top 4 potential. He will be quite the defenseman when he does grow into himself. Yegor Korshkov of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Again, just another well-rounded power forward. Nothing too crazy, nothing overrated, nothing underrated. And yeah, that's it. Those are all the players I created. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed watching this. It took forever to make. I'm glad I finally did a video reviewing all the players I created. I know people have been asking this for a very long time. So yeah, thank you everybody for watching the video. We're watching it. And if you're said you do not need hearing aids, I will see you all in the next one. Peace!